Hi everyone, welcome to the talk for those who couldn't make it to see Chet and Romain's talk. So this talk will be in English, but if you are French and have questions at the end of the talk, do come and ask me questions because I'm actually French, so I'll answer your question in French if needs be. So I'm Marc Poppleton, I'm a software engineer for Orange, and I've been playing around with Android since its public announcement 10 years ago. But I'm not here to do archaeology. I'm here today to give you a quick talk about slices. So what's slices? Well, slices is an API that Google announced at Google I/O 2018. So that's nearly a year ago. Slices are, according to the documentation, I read UI templates that can display rich, dynamic, and interactive contents from your apps. Okay. These templates can be used, I quote, from within the Google Search app and later in other places like the Google Assistant. So let's see an example. Here we have my phone. So on my Pixel phone, if I start to search for Bluetooth in the Google Search app, I'll get search results, but also this. A bit of UI with a toggle button, and I can tap the toggle button to switch on and off the Bluetooth of my phone. And if I tap on the word, it will fire the system configuration app directly on the Bluetooth submenu. So this is a slice in action in a Google search context. Cool. The documentation tells us that we can use all kind of UI templates to combine them to build slices. So we have icon buttons, we have toggle buttons, we have sliders and progress bar, grids, rows, headers, all kinds of UI templates that we can combine to build UIs like the ones which are currently cycling on the screen. So all these are taken from the documentation and are actual slices that we can build. So this looks nice. So let's say that we have this app which very conveniently displays a schedule of talks for a conference with details about the talks and the speakers. It would probably make a great candidate for the Slices API. So, provided we have the source code of this application, what do we need to implement in our application for it to provide slices? Well, for your app to provide slices, it needs a provider. Well, actually, a slice provider to be precise. If you look into the documentation, a slice provider is a instance of a content provider, which is a component which has been around the Android SDK since I think version 1, API 1. Content providers, we're familiar with them every time we want to manage, let's say, contacts or any kind of resources which are provided by a third-party component. Here we have only two functions to implement. First, we have the onCreateSlice provider function to implement, which returns true if you manage to start your provider properly. In case of error, you return false, and so that the system knows, okay, I can use this provider or not. You are implementing a slice provider, which is a content provider. So therefore, it responds to URI requests. And this is done in the onBindSlice function, which takes the URI which you are responding to. So this function returns a slice, and it must return fast. This is mandatory, it's in the documentation. You can't do any background data loading in this function or heavy CPU operation in there. It has to respond fast. We'll see later on how we can get our slice provider to do heavy lifting, but it's in another pattern than in the onBindSlice function. Okay, so like any component of an Android app, you have to declare it in your app's manifest. And you do it like this, a regular provider. The important part here is to have the intent filter matching the what's the name already? Android.app.slice .category.slice pattern. This tells us the system that you are implementing a slice provider. You also need to declare an authority name, which here is com.orange.lab.slices.demo, which will be basically the root of your URI that we'll call to get your slices. It doesn't have to be the same as your package name, but it's best practice to have an authority matching your package name. Sorry, and that's about it. You have your provider and you have your manifest file, which is updated. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Obviously, since we're talking about Android development, you have an almighty Gradle dependency to add to your build file. Note that it's a reference to the AndroidX library, and on AndroidX, if you're not familiar with it, is part of the Jetpack project, and Jetpack is a retro-compatible bunch of libraries, which is compatible way up to API 19, so which is KitKat. So basically, it means that if you're using something inside AndroidX, it will work with 99.9% of the Android ecosystem. And that's also for all those old Samsung devices which haven't had a system update for decades. Okay, so we have our dependencies sorted out. We have our manifest up to date. We have an instance of a slice provider. So usually by now we should be starting to say, okay, well, I guess the next step is writing XML layout files to provide my URI. Well, no, because slices are UI templates. So your provider provides what goes in the template, but it doesn't handle the layout as per se. It's a bit if you were writing a web application and you only had to write the HTML and no CSS. So basically paradise. Plus you don't have any JavaScript to write either. So you don't have any XML layouts files to handle to provide slices. You have just code to write. So let's take an example. Let's say we have this slice we want to build. So how would we proceed? Well, this slice is composed of various UI templates provided by the Slices API. So if we look into detail, we have a header which has a title, here Android Maker, and a subtitle with the text currently live. We also have a grid row in which we have 4 cells, and each cell having an icon image, a title, and a subtitle. So all these are UI templates which are provided by the Slices API. I haven't made any custom component for that. This is just plain vanilla Slices API. Okay, so, well, we have our template. We know what we want to achieve. So how do we proceed? Well, the dependency we've injected in our project, so Slices build the dependency. It provides a nice DSL with a set of helper functions to build our slices with ease. So it all starts, every slices that you're going to build, it will always start with a call of the list function. So you build a slice by calling the list function, providing it a context, the URI which has been requested. A few attributes define the size of potential size of your slice. And then if you want to define a header, what you call a header DSL function, and provide it with a title, subtitle, a summary if need be, and a primary reaction. So the primary reaction is mandatory. You must implement it in your slices, otherwise it will never be displayed by the system. A primary reaction is nothing more than a wrapper around a pending intent, which will be triggered if the user interacts with your slice. So it's a regular pending intent, like all pending intents we have been used to in the Android SDK. So nothing new on this side. So this would be for the header, and for the grid and the cells, well, it's also very easy. Each row is composed of 1 or several cells, each cell having content, which is a combination of image, text, and text being title and a content. You can also bind a intent to this cell, and unlike the primary action, which is mandatory, you don't necessarily have to bind an intent to your cell, but you can, meaning that according to which cell the user will tap, you have a different behavior. You can also add sliders and progress bar to your slices, and combine them with other UI components. And all you have to do, well, is for this case call the input range function that will provide you all the boilerplate code to build a nice range builder. You can also deliver slices which embed things called action buttons. So like this one, we have a small slice which allows us to launch the app if we tap on the left side of the slice, and if we tap on the star, it will probably mark it as a favorite, and on the pen on the right, it will trigger an app to take notes for the talk. All it takes is a call to the add action function, and which is basically what has been done with the Bluetooth sample which I've shown you in the beginning. So here we see we create a slice action, and we call the add action when we build our slices, and it automatically adds as many actions as we want to our slice. So of course, your app is not restricted to providing one and only slice. It can provide as many as you want, actually, because the onbind slice is called every time a slice with the root path being your authority name. So you can do switching between slices paths and provide different slices according to the subpath which has been called. Bear in mind, it's a content provider, so all the business logic that you'd have with a content provider, you have it also with your slice provider. So you can it means you can have a slash speaker slash the name of the speaker and provide a slice for this given speaker, or same for the talks. You can have a fine grain of detail in your slices. Okay, so all we have to do, if I remember right, is to respond to the onbind slice and respond as fast as we can, so the system can provide a slice to render. But what if our data that we're going to use to build our slices is provided by a backend? We have to do network requests. We have async tasks that we can't really manage. So how do we provide a slice as soon as possible and at the same time have relevant data? Well, I might not have been totally honest saying that we only had 2 functions to implement a slice provider. Actually, there's 2 more, so it's not way more, it's 2 more. And these 2 more being on-slice pinned and on-slice unpinned. So the names are pretty obvious, they give you a clear idea of what could happen. But for the sake of playing around with Keynote's animation, I made a nice scheme trying to explain the life cycle of a slice. Excuse me for the very crappy design, I'm not a designer. So what are these 2 functions and when are they called? So, well, first, onbind slices is called, and it provides straight away a slice. Immediately after onbind slice is called, the function onSlicePinned is called. Basically, it tells your slice provider there is a slice displaying application which is hooked to your slice. So if you want to do some background process, you can. And basically, that's when you would start a background thread. This background thread doing its logic. When it has content which is relevant to display, it will call the notify change function of the content resolver, which we should be familiar with because it's been around as long as all the content providers. So it's basically just saying to the system, hey, the content matched to the URI you called have been updated. it's up to you to grab a new version of the content by calling once again on bind slice, or just keep stale content. And when there's no longer apps displaying slices, well, your onSlice unpin function will be called, and at that moment you can kill all kind of background process and avoid as many memory leaks as you can possibly avoid. So all you have to remember is, when you have fresh content, call content resolver notify change with the slice URI which has new content to update on the screen. And it's as simple as that. And with this, you can get dynamic slices with content updating itself, like the one we have here. So I tend to type quite slow, so I do a lot of screen recording. So here we have a slice which is, well, showing all the unread message I would have in an inbox, for example. Okay, so by now I've shown you how you build slices, and you should be starting to think, okay, well, I mean, how do I get slices displayed on a device? Because I've shown you how to build them, but not really how to get the system to show them. Well, what we know from the documentation is that slices is a enhancement of app actions. So, okay, so well, if it's an enhancement of app actions, let's switch to app actions. Problem is, app actions is not yet in developer preview, so well, we can't do app actions, so we can't bind slices to the system. So I guess maybe this talk is ending a bit earlier than expected. Well, no, actually, because this is still something we can do. Because why isn't it displaying? There we go. Google provided an application named the Slice Viewer, and this has been released last year at the same moment as the Slice API. And the Slice Viewer app is a tool provided by Google which enables you to test your app slice providers before all the app actions being available for us developers. So you can see with this application how your slice behaves. And it has 3 display mode. You have large, small, and icon. When you are providing slices, you have no idea which mode the system will choose to display your slice. So it's up to you when you build your slices to think straight away, what is the bare minimum information I want to pass through to my user, and then elaborate from there and provide more and more detail. In small mode, the slice displays just a title, a subtitle, and a summary. In icon mode, well, it displays just an icon. And in large mode, as you can see here, just previous one, it will provide a rich slice with images, with maybe a scrollable grid. It all depends up to you. So you're obviously you're not restricted to one slice viewed by the slice viewer. You can have as many slices as you want, and you can test the various slice actions that you've baked in your slices. As you can see here, I'm tapping the different grid cells in my slice, and it's launching the application in various submenus of my application. So if you pay attention, you'll notice that every time it returns to the slice viewer, it all gets a bit shaky. Things are redrawn every time. That's because slice viewer requests slices each time it loads, and which means that each slice provider is saying, "Well, here's the slice," and rendering on the screen. So you have a good idea of how fast it renders things on screen. And another cool thing about slice viewer is that it's open source. So you can go grab the source of the Slice View application to see how it works and use slices straight away, actually. So that's the URI where you can grab the Slice Viewer. I will share my deck at the end of the talk so you can get the URL later on. So doing so, you can embed content from an app inside another app. So that's an undocumented feature, but it happens to be the first one we can actually use with the Slices API. Here, for example, the part which has been circled is not in the source code of my application. It's a slice provided by another application. Here, let's say I'm writing a news outlet application, and I write an article about I don't know, an artist or whatever, and I quite like to enable the user to listen to music from this artist, but I don't want to have all the hassle of embedding a media player SDK, having an API key to use. So it's a bit way too cumbersome for me. Just what I want to do is maybe add a slice viewer and say, well, if there's an app responding to such scheme for an URI, provide the slice. Otherwise, just don't provide anything in the UI. So here I've got an application with a media player embedded, and all it took is basically a bit of XML to say here in my layout there's a slice viewer and bind it to such slice URI, and it handles all on its own. This is exactly the same slice, but we all know this kind of use case would most likely be used for things like, whoops, oh, I've missed all my fancy effects, which is jamming ads as many as you can in the UI. Oops, sorry. I should have rehearsed. So here I have my article, and it's packed with random ads, all being embedded with just a slice. So also for ads application, it would be a great killer feature. So all I recommend you to do is, well, read my deck later on, have more information. And if ever you're wondering about privacy, about slices being leached by other application, before being displayed, the user has to grant permission. And just to prove you I was right saying that it works on all kind of devices, here's the application running on my Pixel with API 29, so Android Pie, and on the right an old Galaxy Nexus running KitKat, and the application renders slices on both cases. I think we're done. Time as scheduled. So yeah, if you have any question, grab me a coffee and I'll answer your question while drinking coffee. Thank you very much.